Hello, Accelerated Math 6-7 students. We are working in Module 8, and this is Lesson 2. Lesson 2 is called Adding Integers and Other Rational Numbers. Our goal for today is, we are going to learn how to add integers and other rational numbers with different tools. The question that I want you to be thinking about during this lesson is, what are the rules for adding integers? So we have some new information, and so we're working under our category of things to know. A couple of tools for adding rational numbers are the use of the number line and the use of an equation. Okay, so we're going to start with talking about the number line first. So the number line and the arrows. The arrows on a number line tell the length, the direction, and the sum. The length is determined by how many units the arrow spans. So length is determined by how many units the arrow spans. The direction tells whether the integer is positive to the right or negative to the left, and the sum of the arrows tells you the final position. So in order to understand this, I would like to demonstrate what this means. So I am going to show you how to show 4 added to a -7. So the thing that you need to remember about using a number line is that whenever you're adding something, you always start at 0. Okay, that's very, very important. You need to remember that. So whenever we're using a number line to add integers, you always start at 0. So here's 0. I'm going to start right here. So the first thing that it says show 4. So in order to get to 4, I'm going to draw an arrow that spans to the number 4. And it's very, very important that I put an arrow to the right, because that means we're starting at 0 and we're moving to 4. So now 4 is where we're at, and it says show 4 added to a -7. So that means that I have to add -7 to that. So when I add -7 to that, I am going to show you what we are going to come up with in the answer. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to say, okay, -7, that means that I'm going backwards 7 times. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And where I stop is the answer. Okay? And so show 4 added to -7, you get an answer of -3. Okay? Another way to show it, if you want to see, is if you're adding 4 to -7, it could be that you already have -7. So once again, we start at 0. And let's say this time we have -7, and then we're adding 4 to it. So that means we would start at -7 and we would add 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you will notice, we end up in the exact same position, giving us the exact same answer. So we know that 4 added to -7 is going to result in an answer of -3. Okay? So that's how you use arrows on a number line. So you'll notice the length is determined by how many units the arrow spans. Spans mean how long it goes. Okay? The direction tells you whether the integer that you're working with is positive or negative. So a -7 means you go to the left. A +4 means you go to the right. -7 going to the left, +4 going to the right. And then the sum of the arrows tells the final position, and that's where we circle where we stop. Okay? So that's how you use a number line to add integers and other rational numbers. Okay, the next tool that we're going to use is equations. And so equations are a good tool when you're using verbal descriptions. Okay, so math written in words instead of symbols can be very tricky. Okay, the use of equations makes it a whole lot easier. So when we look at this, what we mean is, here is an example. The sum of -8 and 6 is what number? So our first job is to read what we have and turn that into an equation. Okay? The sum of -8 and 6 is what number? So the way to go about doing this so that you find success using an equation instead of words is we have a little checklist. So the first thing that I want you to do is circle the important words. Well, I would definitely say that the word sum is important. I would say that the words -8 are very important. I would say the word and is directly related to the word sum. And then I would say 6 is important. And I know the word is in math always means equals. And then what number is going to give me an answer. So circle the important words. The next step is set up a blank equation. So you have blank plus blank equals blank because we have the sum of one number and another number. Okay? Fill in the given values. So if we're looking at it, it says the sum of -8. So I would say this needs to be a -8 and means plus 6 equals what number? Okay? And then the last step that we're supposed to do is check with the chip method. So let's actually do the math first. And I'm going to go back to using that number line. So I have -8. So again, remember we always start at 0. So here's 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. So I have -8, but I'm always supposed to start on 0. So I'm going to go down to -8. And then it says add 6 to it. So I'm going to start at the -8, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I stop right here. So my answer, according to the number line, is -2. So now there's another way to check it, and it's called the chip method. And basically what the chip method is we have little chips in class that one side is red, the other side is yellow. The red tells you that it's a negative, and the yellow tells you that it's a positive. And so what I do is I use those chips to help show what I actually have. And so for the sake of right now, I'm just going to draw them. So it says I have 8 negatives. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And these are all negatives because it says 8 negatives. And then I have 6 positives. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all positives. And so what you need to learn or what you need to know is that positives and negatives attract. And since they attract, what happens when they attract is they form 0 pairs. So what I can do is then I can put a positive and a negative together, and when I do that, a 0 is formed. So I can take this positive and this negative, and that creates a 0. This positive and this negative, and that creates a 0. This positive with this negative, and that creates a 0. This positive with this negative, and that creates a 0. This positive and this negative, and that creates a 0. And the last one, this positive with this negative, and that creates a 0. So the only thing that's left, and it's kind of hard to see, so when I do it next time I'll write it better, is these two. Those don't have a positive over here to make them into 0 pairs, so the answer left on our chipboard is 2 negatives. So the answer is -2. Does -2 match -2? And the answer is yes, it does. So the answer for this problem, remember, it started out in words. The sum of -8 and 6 is what number? The sum of -8 and 6 is -2. That is the answer. Okay? And so we learned 2 different methods of doing it. We learned the number line method. We learned the equation method using the chip to check. So those are some new information that we'll practice in class. All right, so our lesson is going to continue for just a couple more minutes. And the reason why is because we now have to write down the rules for adding rational numbers with the same sign. So we're taking a look at this, and it says the rules for adding rational numbers with the same sign follows the rules that we just did when we were working with the chips and the number line. And so what you need to look at is you need to look at if we have, it says, when adding a positive and a positive, you get a positive. So if the number has a positive value and you add that to another number that has a positive value, your answer is going to remain positive. So an example of this is if we have 2 plus 3 equals 5, what this looks like if we're using the chip model is that we have 2 positive chips, okay, and then we have 3 positive chips. If we count all of those together, that gives us 5. So when adding a positive and a positive, you get a positive. That's what we learned on this one, okay? When adding a negative and a negative, you get a negative. So if the value of the chip is negative plus a value of the chips that are negative, your answer is still going to have a negative value. So let's look at that. What if we have negative 2 plus negative 3? Would we get negative 5? Well, let's test it and see. This time our chips are negative. So I have 2 negative chips right here, and I have 3 negative chips right here. And when I look at all of them together, because this says to add, do I have 5 negative chips sitting here? And the answer is yes. So when you're adding a negative and a negative, you get a negative. The key word is adding. The key word is adding, okay? So we have this going for us to prove those rules. And now we need to do one more rule for adding rational numbers with different signs. So this is where we're going to think about that zero pair idea. Different signs. When adding a positive and a negative, you take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. And here is why it works. I'm going to show you. So right here it says we have 3 positive chips. So let's draw them. I have 1, 2, 3 positive chips. Okay? And then I have added to it 11 negative chips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And these are all negatives. Okay? And if you remember what I taught you up above, positive and negative chips, when they combine, they create zero pairs. So this is a 0, this is a 0, and this is a 0. So what am I left with? I'm left with 8 negative chips. And so my answer is negative 8. Okay, so now go back up here. It says when adding a positive and a negative, you take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. How far away is 3 from 0? 3 spaces. How far away is negative 11 from 0? 11 spaces. So if you look at our answer, what is the sign of our answer? Negative. Why? Because negative 11 is further away from 0 than 3. And so you take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, and that number happened to be negative, so your answer has to be negative. You're probably wondering why I have the number line down there. Just another visual representation. We always start at 0. We go to 3. Then we're supposed to add on 11 negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And our answer is negative 8. Okay? So I've shown you many ways to add integers and other rational numbers. So let's go back to our goal one more time. Today we are going to learn how to add integers and other rational numbers with different tools. Lots of different tools today. What are the rules for adding integers? Positive plus a positive gives you a positive. A negative plus a negative gives you a negative. And if you're adding a positive and a negative, you take the sign of the number that has the greatest absolute value. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks. Bye.